Good morning and welcome to our daily devotion. So today we're going to start on our study of faithfulness. And I'm kind of skipping the order. This is not the exact order that the fruit of the Spirit is listed in the Bible, but I wanted to go over faithfulness. We've done love, joy, and peace. And I think faithfulness is a good one to start on. So the word for faithfulness in Greek is pistos, P-I-S-T-O-S. And it means to be trusted or reliable, believing, firm persuasion, faithful. So the word is for standing fast, steadfastness, loyal, devoted, tried, constant, reliable, unwavering, trustworthy, dependable, resolute, honest, punctual, and steady. And that is quite a list of characters, is it not? This fruit can also be called fidelity. It also speaks of endurance, a firmness or purpose, especially when living is tough. It is more than just a grit and bear it kind of attitude. It's a very positive, active attribute of character and a much needed one in today's flippant society. And the faithful person is dependable in all of life's circumstances. This is a much desired characteristic in others with whom we have had any kind of relationship. We all need to be people of faithfulness. D.L. Moody said, "I believe in a faith that you can see, a living, working faith that prompts action. For faith without works is like a man putting all his money into the foundation of a house. And works without faith is like building a house on sand without any foundation." God is the source and standard of faithfulness which he has demonstrated in his dealings with the human race. In the New Testament, Jesus Christ models the same kind of faithfulness in relationships with his followers. The Holy Spirit is ready to bring this trait of character to full maturity in your life and in my life, so that we too can be counted on to be faithful in all circumstances with our relationships. There's an old hymn that usually can be found in any denominations. It's "Great is thy faithfulness." And we sing it at my church. I've sung it at every church I've ever been into. But the first verse says, "Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions they fail not. As they hast been, thou forever will be." And the verses go on, and then the chorus, and I don't sing, so I'm not singing this, but I'm singing it in my head because I love it. It says, "Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning new mercies I see. All that I have needed thou hand hast provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me." It's a beautiful hymn. Faith and faithfulness are closely linked, faith being foundation to all we believe and act upon. Faith is that undefinable power through which we can realize as reality things that are yet unseen. Faithfulness is working out of this inner belief system. We have faith in God. We act in faithful ways. Acts of faithfulness are the demonstration that we have true faith in God, and such acts are the threads of holding our belief and behavior system together. As the writer said, faith without works is dead. Let's begin our study today with a look at the foundation for faithfulness from the faith chapter of the Bible. And we're going to read Hebrews 11, 1 through 40. Faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It is the evidence of things we cannot see. Through their faith, the people in the days of old earned a good reputation. By faith, we understand that the entire universe was formed at God's command, that what we now see did not come from anything that can be seen. It was by faith that Abel brought a more acceptable offering to God than Cain did. Abel's offering gave evidence that he was a righteous man, and God showed his approval of his gifts. Although Abel is long dead, he still speaks to us by his example of faith. It was by faith that Enoch was taken into heaven without dying. His disappearance because God took him. For before he was taken up, he was known as a person who pleased God. And it is possible to please God without faith. Is it? Anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. It was by faith that Noah built a large boat to save his family from the flood. He obeyed God, who warned him about the things that had never happened before. By his faith, Noah condemned the rest of the world, and he received the righteousness that comes by faith. It was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home and go into another land that God would give him as his inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going. He even reached the land God promised him. He lived there by faith, for he was like a foreigner living in tents. And so did Isaac and Jacob, who inherited the same promise. Abraham was confidently looking forward to a city with eternal foundations, a city designed and built by God. It was by faith that even Sarah was able to have a child, though she was barren and she was too old. She believed that God would keep his promise, and so a whole nation came from this one man who was as good as dead. A nation with so many people that, like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, there is no way to count them. All these people died still believing what God had promised them. They did not receive what was promised, but they saw it from a distance, and that they welcomed it. They agreed that they were foreigners and nomads here. Obviously, people who say such things are looking forward to a country they can call their own. If they had longed for a country they came from, they could have gone back, but they were looking for a better place, a heavenly homeland. That is why God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. It was by faith that Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice when God was testing him. Abraham, who had received God's promises, was ready to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. Even though God had told him, Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted. Abraham reasoned that if Isaac died, God was able to bring him back to life again. And in a sense, Abraham did receive his son back from the dead. It was by faith that Isaac promised blessings for the future to his sons, Jacob and Esau. It was by faith that Jacob, when he was old and dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and bowed in worship as he leaned on his staff. It was by faith that Joseph, when he was about to die, said confidently that the people of Israel would leave Egypt. He even commanded them to take his bones with them when they left. It was by faith that Moses' parents hid him for 3 months when he was born. They saw that God had given them an unusual child, and they were afraid to disobey the king's command. It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. He thought it was better to suffer for the sake of Christ than to own the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking ahead to his great reward. It was by faith that Moses left the land of Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He kept right on going because he kept his eyes on the one who was invisible. It was by faith that Moses commanded the people of Israel to keep the Passover and to sprinkle blood on the doorposts that the angel of death would not kill their firstborn sons. It was by faith that people of Israel went right through the Red Sea as though they were on dry ground. But when the Egyptians tried to follow, they were all drowned. It was by faith that the people of Israel marched around Jericho for 7 days, and the walls came crashing down. It was by faith that Rahab, the prostitute, was not destroyed with the people in her city who refused to obey God, for she had given a friendly welcome to spies. How much more do I need to say? It would take too long to recount the stories of faith of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and all the prophets. By faith, these people overthrew kingdoms, ruled with justice, and received what God had promised them. They shut the mouth of lions, quenched the flames of fire, and escaped death at the edge of the sword. Their weaknesses would turn to strength. They became strong in the battle and put whole armies to flight. Women received their loved ones back from the dead. But others were tortured, refusing to turn from God in order to be set free. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. Some were jeered at, and their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained in prisons. Some died by stoning, some were sawed in half, and others were killed with the sword. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, and destitute and oppressed and mistreated. They were too good for this world, wandering over deserts and mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the ground. All these people earned a good reputation because of their faith, yet none of them received all that God had promised, for God had something better in mind for us, so that they would not reach perfection without us. And that, my friend, is faith. Those are wonderful stories in the Bible. And as we read through, I encourage you to go back and read Hebrews 11, 1 through 40. And if you don't know the stories of some of the little vignettes of faith that I read in Hebrews, go back and read the stories of faith. They're tremendous. So through all of this reading, what is the biblical definition of faith? And how do we apply that faith to our everyday living? These are questions that we must ask ourselves. Which hero of faith do you think was the most faithful? There's a lot in this to unpack in Hebrews 11, 1 through 40. But just ask yourself some of these questions. How much faith is required in order to be faithful and pleasing to God? Well, there's another place in Scripture that says it's about the size of the seed of a mustard seed. Very little. Can you find any flawed people who are listed among these heroes of faith? I can. Moses was a murderer. Rahab was a prostitute. Esau and Jacob tricked their father for his birthright. I mean, there's a lot of imperfect people, but they were also faithful to God. In your own words, write a description of what a faithful person would be. That is the assignment for tonight. What do you think a faithful person is? And list the ways that God has been faithful to you, and how can you be more faithful to them? Thank you, my friends, for joining me today. God bless and have a beautiful week, and I will see you tomorrow.